On my birthday, my brother hit my 14-year-old son with a baseball bat and broke his hips. My parents defended him and called it a man teaching a lesson. I protected my kid instead and watched their perfect family title burn to ash. Hey Reddit, my family's always treated my brother like a saint and me like the problem. I built my own life, my own success, and kept my distance. But turns out, walking away wasn't enough. They brought the chaos right to my doorstep. Let me start from the beginning. My name's William Carter, and I've spent 20 years earning a living the hard way. Long days, calloused hands, and jobs done right. I run a small construction company in Spokane, Washington, building custom homes. It's honest work, and the house my family lives in? I built it myself, beam by beam. My wife Maria keeps me grounded. Quiet strength, tougher than most men I know. Our kids reflect both of us. Noah, 14, loves taking things apart and rebuilding them. Lily, 12, sees through people faster than I ever could. The only tension in my life comes from outside these walls. My brother Paul, 38, still blames the world for his failures. And my parents, Robert and Helen, enable him. They call me lucky. Pretend my success just happened. Paul's always been the golden child. I'm just the proof they can't ignore. A week before my 40th birthday, Maria suggested a backyard cookout. I wasn't interested in attention, but she smiled that knowing smile and said it was for the kids. I gave in. One simple celebration, family and friends. Nothing fancy. At least, that's what I thought. I called my parents out of courtesy. My mother sounded thrilled, asked what she could bring. My father just grunted something about, as long as it's not one of those show-off parties. Then Paul called. He laughed through the phone, that smug tone he always uses when he's got nothing else to offer. Big man turning 40, huh? Bet you're grilling steak with that contractor money. It's just a cookout, I said. Yeah, he chuckled. I'm sure it is. Must be nice having everything work out for you. I almost hung up, but instead I said, show up if you want, Paul. Just don't bring drama. But he laughed again and said he wouldn't miss it for the world. Later that night, my mother called back. William, keep things civil, she said. Your brother's been under pressure. People talk when families fight. Then he can behave himself, I told her. She sighed. That disappointed tone I've known my whole life. You know how your temper can be. After I hung up, I sat out on the porch. The sky was clear, the kind of quiet that makes you think about the years behind you. I thought about what Maria had said, how the kids wanted to celebrate, and I felt something between pride and unease. I've spent my whole life earning respect the hard way. When men talk to me, they know I mean what I say. When someone crosses me, they don't get a second chance. That's not ego. It's survival. You set a line early in life, or people walk all over you. As the cookout got closer, Maria handled most of the planning. The kids made decorations and talked about grilling marshmallows after dark. Watching them, I reminded myself why I was doing it. For them. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting under the surface. I told myself it would be fine, that I could hold it together for one night. But I also made a promise. To myself, not anyone else. If anyone brought disrespect into my home, I wouldn't look the other way this time. Not from Paul, not from my parents, not from anyone. Everyone's got a breaking point. Mine was closer than I realized. By late afternoon, the backyard was alive with smoke, chatter, and the smell of grilled meat. My father, Robert, had parked himself near the cooler, beer in hand, holding court like it was his job. I didn't look up. He'd been doing that all day, complimenting Paul for surviving his own laziness, pretending it was character. My mother, Helen, was hovering near Maria at the buffet table. Every sentence started as a compliment and ended as a critique. These are lovely sides, dear. Though you might want to keep the potato salad on ice longer next time. Mayo spoils quick. Maria just smiled, polite and unbothered, the way she always is when someone tries to get under her skin. Paul had arrived an hour late, wearing sunglasses like he was avoiding daylight. He'd slapped my back, called me birthday boy, then looked around the yard like he was inspecting someone else's success. Nice setup, Will, he said. Guess construction money buys a decent backyard. I didn't bite. Hard work does, I told him, turning back to the grill. Throughout the evening, he kept tossing out little jabs. You still swinging that hammer yourself? Or you got guys doing the dirty work now? Bet you pay someone to mow this perfect lawn too, huh? He wanted a reaction. He didn't get one. Across the yard, Noah was showing his new electric skateboard to the cousins. The board was sleek, his pride and joy. He'd spent weeks helping me with odd jobs to earn it. The kids circled around as he explained how the throttle worked. Then Jake, Paul's 15-year-old son, swaggered in. Cool board, he said, grabbing it before Noah could answer. He kicked off and started circling the yard, accelerating fast. The other kids cheered until he nearly clipped a lawn chair and almost crashed into the fence. "Jake, stop!" Noah called out. He sounded calm, just firm. "Give it back before you break it." Jake smirked and swung around. "Relax, dude. It's just a toy." "It's not a toy," Noah said. "It's mine. Hand it over." Before Jake could respond, Paul's voice cut through the laughter. "Hey, don't talk to him like that." The yard went quiet. Everyone looked up. Paul swaggered over, beer in one hand, that half grin on his face. "You don't snatch things from your cousin and start barking orders. You're acting spoiled." Noah blinked, confused, but stood his ground. He took it without asking. "I just want it back." Paul chuckled. "Kid, when your old man teaches you some manners, maybe you'll understand family shares things." That's when I stepped forward. "He earned that board, Paul," I said, voice steady. "If you've got a problem, take it up with me." The silence after that was heavy, the kind where everyone holds their breath. Paul turned to face me fully. His eyes were glassy, cheeks flushed from beer. "Oh, come on. Don't tell me you're raising another soft one. Back in our day, a kid would have handed it over and learned some respect." I didn't move. "He's got respect. You just can't tell the difference between respect and obedience," Robert muttered from his seat, loud enough for everyone. "You're too aggressive these days, son. Always spoiling for a fight." I heard him, but I didn't answer. I looked at Noah instead. "Go inside, bud. Put the board away." Noah picked it up, nodded once, and walked toward the house without another word. Paul watched him leave, shaking his head, muttering something about raising soft men. I caught Maria's eyes across the table. She was tense, jaw tight but silent. She knew the line had just been drawn. For a few minutes, the air in the yard was thin. My crew glanced at me, waiting for a cue. I went back to the grill, flipped another steak, acted like the moment was gone. But it wasn't. Paul slammed his beer down on the table, foam spilling over. "You know what, Will? You think money makes you better than everyone here. But you've forgotten what family even means." "Family," I said without looking up, "means knowing when to shut your mouth at another man's house." A few guests tried to laugh it off, pretending the tension wasn't thick enough to choke on. Maria moved closer to the kids, her eyes scanning Paul like she could already see the trouble coming. Paul stared at me for a long second, then turned toward the cooler, grabbed another beer, and stumbled off toward the garage at the side of the house. Through the open side door, the garage cam blinked green above the workbench. His shoulders were stiff, jaw locked, the look of a man who decided he needed to prove something. I watched him go, my gut tightening. He didn't look angry. He looked dangerous. Maria came up beside me, voice low. "You should tell him to leave." "Not yet," I said. "If he wants to act up, let him do it where everyone can see. I'm not chasing him." She didn't argue, but she didn't look convinced either. Her hand rested on my arm, light but tense. The grill hissed as fat dripped into the flames, smoke curling up between us. The party chatter started again, softer this time, like everyone was pretending nothing had happened. But I could feel it. Underneath the music, beneath the laughter, something was shifting. Paul had gone quiet, and the quiet was worse than the noise. Maria leaned in just enough for only me to hear. "It's too calm," she said. "That's the kind of quiet that comes before something breaks." I didn't know it then, but she was right. Then we heard a scream. That sound, it wasn't just pain. It was betrayal. It froze the whole yard. The music stopped, the laughter died, and every head turned toward the house. For a second, no one moved. Then Maria's eyes met mine. I dropped the tongs, and we both ran. I didn't know what I'd find. The scream had come from the garage, sharp and raw, like something breaking in half. When I pushed the door open, the smell of oil and metal hit me first. Then the sight that burned itself into my memory. Noah was on the floor, one hand clutching his side, gasping for air. His face was twisted in pain, eyes wide and unfocused. A few feet away, Paul stood frozen, holding a baseball bat. His knuckles were white around the handle, his expression blank, almost surprised at what he'd done. Maria rushed past me with Lily right behind her. She dropped to her knees next to Noah, her voice cracking as she called his name. "Noah, breathe, baby, breathe." I didn't say anything. I just looked at Paul, then at my son. That's when everything inside me snapped. I charged him. The bat clattered to the floor when I hit him. My fist connected with his jaw, then again, and again. He stumbled back, hitting the wall, but I didn't stop. My only thought was that my son was lying there because of him. I don't remember shouting, but my throat burned. Maria screamed my name. I barely heard her. Paul's face was already a mess, his nose bleeding, his hands raised in defense. He tried to talk, but I didn't care. I kept swinging until Maria's hands grabbed my arm, her voice cutting through the noise. William, stop! You'll kill him. That was the first time I noticed everyone else. The guests had rushed in, crowding the doorway, staring like they'd walked into a nightmare. Robert pushed through them, shouting my name. That's enough! For God's sake, stop it! I let go. Paul dropped to his knees, gasping, holding his face. Blood dripped from his lip onto the concrete. The bat lay beside him, streaked with dust and a smear of something darker. I turned toward Noah. He was curled up, trembling, his breath shallow and quick. Maria's hands were shaking as she tried to lift his shirt. There was already a deep bruise spreading across his ribs, purple and angry. Lily stood frozen near the door, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. What did you do? Maria shouted at Paul, her voice shaking with fury. Paul didn't answer. He looked dazed, like he couldn't process what had just happened. He talked back, he muttered. He needed to learn. Before I could move again, Robert stepped between us. That's enough, both of you, he barked, his tone sharp, like he was still in control of the situation. Paul didn't mean it. He was just disciplining the boy. I stared at him. Disciplining? He didn't know his own strength, Robert said. You can't attack your brother like that in front of everyone. Maria stood, still holding on to Noah. Her voice was low but dangerous. He hit a child with a bat, Robert. A 14-year-old boy. Look at him. Helen came rushing in then, pushing past people until she was at Paul's side. She knelt beside him, her face full of shock and anger. Not at what he'd done, but at me. William, how could you? She said. You've humiliated your family in front of everyone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son was on the ground, barely able to breathe, and all they cared about was embarrassment. Paul tried to stand, swaying, one hand still covering his bloody face. He deserved it, he said hoarsely. Kids got no respect. That did it. I stepped forward again, but Maria grabbed my arm hard enough to stop me. Don't, she said. He's not worth it. I looked at her, then at Noah. His breathing was uneven, a soft whimper escaping every time he moved. I dropped to my knees beside him, pressing a hand gently on his shoulder. Hang on, son. We've got you. Maria looked around at the frozen crowd. Someone call 911, she yelled. No one moved. They just stood there, whispering, staring at the mess on the floor. My father's voice broke through again, stern and cold. You're not calling the police, he said. This is family business. We'll handle it. Maria's glare could have burned through steel. Our son has broken ribs, she said. You're worried about gossip? I'm calling them. She pulled her phone from her pocket and dialed. I heard her voice shake as she gave the address, described the scene, and said the words that made everything real. My brother-in-law attacked my son with a baseball bat. Paul started to panic, mumbling that it wasn't what it looked like, that he didn't mean it. Helen tried to hush him, wiping the blood from his face with a napkin, whispering, Don't say anything. Robert turned on me. You brought this on yourself, he snapped, always making him feel small. You push people long enough, they break. So I stood slowly, facing him. He didn't break. He's a grown man who hit a kid. There's a difference. For once, Robert didn't have a comeback. He just stared, jaw tight, eyes full of something between hate and disbelief. The sound of sirens began to rise in the distance. Blue and red lights flickered against the walls through the garage window. Lily moved closer to Maria, clutching her mother's sleeve. Mom, is Noah going to be okay? She whispered. Maria nodded, though her face said she wasn't sure. He will be, she said softly. He will. When the first officer stepped inside, the scene froze again. Noah on the floor, Maria holding him, Paul bleeding and silent. My parents in denial. The officer's eyes moved across all of us before settling on the bat. Who called this in? He asked. Maria raised her hand. I did, she said. He looked at Paul. You the one with the bat? Paul didn't answer. He just looked down, breathing hard. The officer sighed, radioing for paramedics. All right, he said. No one leaves unless you're with the medics. We're going to sort this out. As they started their work, I knelt beside Noah again. He tried to speak, but couldn't. I pressed his shoulder gently. Save your strength, I said. We're right here. A second team went to Paul, who sat slumped against the wall with blood on his face. A medic pressed gauze to his lip and called out, Possible nasal fracture. My father, Robert, stepped in front of the officers like he owned the place. This is family business, he said. We'll handle it ourselves. I moved between them. Family or not, that man hit a child with a weapon. The officer didn't argue. We'll need statements, he said, nodding to his partner. Get photos of the bat. The ambulance doors shut behind Noah and Maria, with Lily climbing in after them. When the doors closed, the yard went quiet except for the radios crackling on the officers' belts. Paul was taken into the second ambulance, his face a blur of bruises and resentment. At the hospital, the air smelled like disinfectant and metal. They pushed Noah into a small ER room, nurses working fast. A doctor ran her fingers along his ribs, then looked up at me. 2 fractures on the right side, she said. We'll order a scan to check for internal damage. Maria's composure broke then. She turned her face away, tears coming fast and silent. I stayed beside the bed, hand resting on Noah's shoulder. The only sound was the machine's beeping steady. Across the hall, Paul sat in another exam bay, guarded by a police officer. His face was swollen, eyes bloodshot. When our eyes met, he smirked like he still thought he had control. I turned away. A detective came in with a recorder and notebook. Tell me what happened, he said. I gave him the short version. I heard my son scream. When I got there, Paul was standing with a bat. My son was on the ground. I reacted. The detective nodded. We'll take the footage from your home cameras. We'll need both your statements again later. While we waited, Noah started to stir. His eyes opened slowly. Dad? His voice was faint, every breath a wince. I'm here, I said. He swallowed hard. He came in yelling, said I disrespected him. I told him I wasn't trying to be rude. Then he grabbed the bat. He stopped to breathe. I turned to leave, and he swung. Felt like my ribs cracked. Maria wiped his forehead. It's over, she said softly. You're safe now. The CT results came back clean. The doctor returned, clipboard in hand. 2 fractured ribs, no organ damage. We'll manage the pain, fit a soft support, and focus on breathing exercises. He needs rest. Maria thanked her, voice trembling. I stood back, watching the doctor fit a soft support and coach him on breathing. Every slow breath made him wince, but he didn't complain. A woman from Child Protective Services arrived, mid-40s, calm, direct. She introduced herself and asked to speak with us privately. We followed her into a small waiting room off the hallway. Has Paul ever acted violently toward your family before? She asked. No, Maria said. He drinks. He yells. But this, never. Any history of fights or threats? He's thrown things, I said. Tonight he used a bat. The agent took notes, steady and methodical. Based on what I've heard, this qualifies as assault on a minor with a weapon. CPS will request a temporary no-contact order for your household, and the police will pursue the criminal charges. Do it, I said. She looked at Maria. You did the right thing calling 911. Maria nodded, holding the tissue crumpled in her fist. It didn't feel like I had a choice. When we stepped back into the hallway, my parents were there. Robert's expression was tight, his anger hiding under a thin layer of control. Helen stood beside him, red-eyed and trembling. Robert didn't waste a second. You've humiliated this family, he said. Bringing the police into our business? You've destroyed your brother. He destroyed himself, I said. He hit my kid. Helen's voice cracked. You didn't have to make a scene. We could have handled this quietly. Quietly? Maria snapped before I could speak. Our son is lying in a hospital bed. Robert pointed at me. You've always been the same. Ready to make Paul look bad. I stepped closer. You protect the wrong people. Don't ever set foot in my house again. He didn't back down. Watch your mouth, son. I looked him straight in the eye. No, watch yours. For a long second, no one said anything. Then he took Helen's arm and turned away. They walked down the hallway without looking back. Maria exhaled, slow and shaky. That's it then, she said. Yeah, I said. That's it. The detective returned with a clipboard. Paul's being charged with assault in the 2nd degree. Deadly weapon, he said. He'll be transported once he's medically cleared. CPS has already requested an order of no contact. Good, I said. He nodded. We'll contact you for follow-up. Noah was dozing when we went back to his room. Lily sat beside him, tracing small circles on the blanket. Maria read the discharge papers aloud, checking every instruction twice. I stepped into the hall and grabbed 2 coffees from the vending machine. The bitterness helped keep me steady. When I came back, the doctor was finishing the wrap and handing over a prescription. Pain meds, no sports, no heavy lifting. If he struggles to breathe, bring him back immediately. Noah managed a weak grin. Guess no skateboarding. Not for a while, I said. They released him just before dark. Outside, the air smelled like rain. I helped Noah into the truck, buckled him carefully, while Maria and Lily climbed in behind. The drive home was quiet. Every streetlight flickered across the windshield in slow rhythm. Maria reached over and rested her hand on my arm. I didn't need to say anything. At the house, I got Noah settled on the couch, propped up with pillows, a blanket tucked around him. Maria locked every door, checked every window. Lily stayed by her brother until he drifted off. I stood in the kitchen looking out at the dark yard. The same garage sat there, ordinary and still, but it didn't feel like part of home anymore. Something had changed in those walls. From now on, nobody, not family, not anyone, would make my kids feel small or unsafe again. Whatever it cost, that line wasn't moving. A week later, the house had gone quiet again. Noah was healing, wrapped in his rib brace, moving slow but steady. Maria was back at work half days, and Lily hovered close to her brother, never letting him lift anything heavier than a glass of water. That morning, I sat at the kitchen counter with my coffee, reviewing invoices. The sun was just breaking over Spokane, lighting the edge of the yard. It was the first morning that almost felt normal. Then, the doorbell rang. 2 quick presses, a pause, then one more. I knew that rhythm. I set my mug down and walked to the door. Through the frosted glass, I saw Paul. One arm in a sling, face half covered by sunglasses, same cocky stance as always. Even with a temporary no-contact order already in place, he showed up at my door. I opened the door halfway. "You shouldn't be here." He grinned like it was a joke. "Relax. I'm not here to fight, just to make things right. There's nothing left to fix." Paul reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope, waving it like a prop. "This'll cover the hospital bills, and then some. Tell Noah to forget what happened, and we can all move on." I stared at the envelope, then back at him. "You think you can buy silence?" He smirked. "It's called being practical. You drop the charges, I cover the damage. Everybody wins. You get to stop acting like the hero." I nodded toward the security camera above the porch light. "Say that again for the recording." His grin faltered. His eyes flicked up to the lens, then back to me. "You're unbelievable," he muttered. "Always have to prove you're better than me." "Better?" I said. "No. Just not a coward who hides behind money." His nostrils flared. "You think you're righteous? You're pathetic." "Dad's right. You've always been full of yourself." I kept my voice level. "Leave, Paul, before you make it worse." He stepped closer. "Worse. You already turned Mom and Dad against me. You ruined this family. You did that when you picked up a bat." The words hit him harder than my fists ever had. His jaw tightened, and he shoved the envelope against my chest. "Keep it. You'll need it when people hear how you beat your own brother. Clients will bail, and your fancy little business will start falling apart." I let it fall to the porch. "Pick that up on your way out." For a moment, he just stood there, breathing hard. Then he pointed at me with his good hand. "You're teaching that boy to hate. You'll regret this." I didn't answer. I just shut the door. Through the glass, I watched him storm off and peel away down the street. When his car disappeared, I opened the door again, grabbed the envelope with a paper towel, and set it on the counter. Inside was a neat stack of bills. Mostly hundreds, maybe 10 grand total. Dirty money meant to clean a mess that couldn't be cleaned. I took pictures of everything, the cash, the envelope, the timestamp from the porch camera, and called the detective handling Paul's case. He showed up that afternoon, watched the footage, and shook his head. "Tampering with a witness," he said flatly. "We'll add it to the charges. And it's also a violation of the no-contact order." By the time he left, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Clarity. An hour later, my phone buzzed. "Robert." I almost ignored it, but answered anyway. "William," he started immediately, "your mother's in tears. Why are you still pushing this? Your brother's not a criminal." "He tried to bribe me this morning," I said. "That's not family, that's corruption." "Don't exaggerate," he snapped. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You'll regret tearing this family apart." "It was already torn apart," I said, and hung up. Respect isn't something you ask for or buy, it's something you enforce. And from now on, anyone who crossed that line, family or not, would learn exactly what that meant. 6 months later, trial. The courthouse parking lot was packed before the sun was fully up. News vans lined the street, reporters clutching microphones, cameras pointed at the front steps. The porch video had made the rounds online. Cameras were already waiting. Spokane didn't get headlines like this often. I walked through the crowd without a word. Maria stayed close, her hand brushing mine. Inside, security ran bags through scanners. The smell of polished floors and burnt coffee filled the air. At the far end of the corridor, the courtroom door was open, the murmur of voices spilling out. I took my seat beside our lawyer, a steady man in his 50s with a calm, weathered face. Across the aisle sat Paul, his arm held awkward in a sling. His jaw was still tender. Faint yellowing lingered where the bruises had been. He wore a pressed suit, the picture of forced dignity. Behind him sat Robert and Helen, stone-faced. The judge entered. The bailiff called order, and the noise settled. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but I could feel every eye fixed on us. The prosecution opened first. The state presented the video from my home cameras, the one that caught Paul in the garage. The sound was faint, but the image was clear. Paul raising the baseball bat, the swing, the moment Noah fell out of frame. Gasps rippled through the room. Paul stared down at the table, jaw locked. Next came the porch footage. Paul standing at my front door, holding the envelope, offering a bribe. The audio played clear as day. Tell the boy to forget what happened, and we all walk away clean. The judge's eyes narrowed. The prosecutor didn't add commentary. He didn't need to. Maria took the stand next. She told the story cleanly. How she found Noah on the ground, how I reacted, how my parents tried to stop her from calling the police. She didn't raise her voice, but every word landed like a hammer. Then Noah walked up to testify. He moved carefully, still stiff from healing. He didn't look at Paul. I was fixing my skateboard, he said, voice steady. He came in angry, said I was disrespectful. I tried to leave, and he hit me. The prosecutor asked what happened next. I screamed, Noah said. Then I saw my dad run in. That was all. No dramatics, just truth. When it was my turn, I stood, buttoned my jacket, and stepped into the witness box. The defense lawyer didn't look up from his papers. The prosecutor started simple. Mr. Carter, after seeing your son injured, what did you do? I hit Paul, I said, repeatedly. Why? He hurt my son, I said. I reacted like a father. A few heads nodded around the room. The prosecutor thanked me and sat down. The defense took over, trying to twist it. So you admit to assaulting your brother? I admit to stopping him, I said. If I'd waited, he might have swung again. The lawyer tried to paint me as short-tempered, but it fell flat. Every question he asked circled back to the same point. Paul hit a child. Nothing else mattered. The judge called for closing arguments after a short recess. The prosecution was crisp. This case isn't about rivalry, he said. It's about accountability. A grown man used a weapon on a minor, then tried to buy silence. The evidence speaks for itself. The defense leaned on family loyalty, calling it a misunderstanding gone too far. But even he sounded tired saying it. When the jury returned, the room felt weightless. The foreman handed the paper to the judge. She read slowly, voice echoing in the chamber. On the charge of assault in the second degree, deadly weapon. Guilty. On the charge of tampering with a witness. Guilty. Paul's shoulders sagged. 8 weeks later, sentencing. The judge pronounced sentence. The defendant, Paul Carter, is sentenced to 4 years in state prison, completion of an anger management program, full restitution for medical expenses, and a permanent restraining order protecting the Carter family. A few gasps rippled from the spectators' benches. Robert lowered his head. Helen pressed her hand to her mouth, shaking. The judge turned to me. The felony matter related to your altercation is dismissed. On the separate misdemeanor count of disorderly conduct, the court finds you guilty and imposes a fine and a brief anger management program. I nodded once. Understood. The gavel came down. Case closed. Paul sat motionless as deputies approached. When they pulled him to his feet, he turned toward me. His eyes burned with the same twisted pride he'd always carried. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look said everything. Blame, hate, refusal to learn. Maria touched my arm. Don't look at him, she whispered. He's not worth it. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. Reporters crowded the steps, shouting questions. Was justice served? Will you forgive your brother? But I didn't answer. Maria and I kept walking. Behind us, cameras flashed, the crowd closing around the courthouse doors. Later that day, we learned Paul's wife had filed for divorce. She'd packed up and left the house 2 days before the verdict. She knew how bad it would get, Maria said quietly. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victory, just the kind of peace that comes after a long storm. That evening, we stopped at a diner on the edge of town. Doctor said take it easy, not eat perfectly. Noah ordered fries anyway. Lily stole half of them, and for a moment, we were just a family again. On the drive home, Maria finally spoke. You did what needed to be done. I kept my eyes on the road. That's the only way I know. She nodded, and neither of us said another word. By the time we got home, the night was still and clear. I looked at the garage as we passed it. The memory didn't sting anymore. It just existed, part of the story, no longer controlling it. Justice wasn't revenge. It was the moment you stopped looking back. 3 years passed. The noise was gone, replaced by a steady rhythm of work, home, and peace. The chaos that once filled our lives had burned out. leaving something stronger behind. My construction company had doubled in size. I spent less time on the tools and more time teaching the next generation. Young workers who reminded me of myself 20 years ago. I made sure they understood that skill wasn't enough. Integrity mattered more. When I talked about leadership, I didn't quote books or bosses. I told them the truth. You earn respect by showing up when it counts. Noah worked summers for me now. 17, taller than me by an inch. Confident in his stance and quiet when he spoke. He was saving for college, planning to study engineering. Watching him handle blueprints and power tools with that calm focus made something settle in my chest. He'd turned the pain into drive. Lily, 15, had become sharper with age. She spoke her mind without hesitation, and I never discouraged it. She called out nonsense when she heard it, even from me. She was the kind of girl who'd never let anyone walk over her, and I was proud of that. Maria's garden had become her kingdom. Rows of flowers stretched along the fence, neat and alive. She said the work calmed her, but I knew it was more than that. It was how she rebuilt balance. She never talked about Paul or my parents anymore. Neither did I. Paul was still serving his sentence. Paul was 3 years down, 1 to go. I hadn't seen him since the day deputies took him from the courtroom. I didn't need updates. The system could handle him now. As for Robert and Helen, they faded out of our lives like background noise after a storm. They never reached out, and I never expected them to. The last I heard, they'd sold their house and moved south. I didn't send a forwarding address. I thought cutting them off would leave a hole, but it didn't. It left room. Space for the kind of peace I'd never known before. One Saturday in July, the 4 of us gathered in the backyard, the same yard where everything once shattered. The air was warm, the fire pit crackling. Noah had grilled steaks. Lily was roasting marshmallows. Maria sat beside me, her hand resting on my knee. The smell of wood smoke mixed with her perfume. It felt like the world had finally exhaled. Noah leaned back in his chair. "You remember that old skateboard?" he asked with a grin. Maria smiled. "The one that caused all this?" He laughed. "Yeah, I still have it in the garage. Thought about fixing it up, maybe hanging it on the wall." "Keep it," I said. "A reminder of how far you've come." He nodded, quiet again, watching the flames dance. Lily tossed a burnt marshmallow into the fire and said, "Can I take the truck tomorrow?" "I want to meet Ava at the bookstore." Maria raised an eyebrow. "You're 15. I'll drive slow," Lily said, smirking. I shook my head. "Not yet, kiddo. Learn patience first." She rolled her eyes but smiled anyway. The moment passed with laughter. Small, easy, real. The sun started to dip behind the trees, painting the sky orange. Firelight flickered across their faces, and for the first time in years, the house felt whole. The same backyard that once echoed with shouts now carried only the sound of my kids' voices and the hum of crickets. I looked at Maria, her eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. "You ever think about them?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "Not anymore. We built something better." I nodded. "Yeah, we did." The truth was simple. Peace didn't come from forgetting what happened. It came from refusing to let it define us. I used to believe blood meant loyalty, that family was automatic. But I learned that isn't true. Blood doesn't mean loyalty. You earn that through actions, not last names. Loyalty is standing up when it matters. It's choosing what's right even when it costs you something. It's Maria holding our family together. It's Noah fighting through pain without bitterness. It's Lily's honesty, sharp and fearless. That night, I leaned back in my chair, feeling the heat from the fire on my hands. The stars were starting to come out. The yard glowed with string lights Noah had hung last summer, and the sound of the kids laughing drifted through the air. Maria reached over and took my hand. I looked at her, then at the house, the yard, the life we'd fought to protect. A man's job is simple. Protect what's his. I don't start fights, but I finish anything that comes for mine. The fire cracked again, sending a spark into the night, and I let it burn. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.